whether last night's show was good or whether it sucked. And I think the jury's still out on that one.
I think it went really well. There were no lulls in the conversation. But David says, start out with low expectations and things can only go better, right? That's what I always say.
That's true, but that's true. But it's only good because you came out from Italy.
I did,
and you had a lot. We had a lot to talk about Italy and Italy as a nation and a society and the fact that they're a socialist country,
right,
like many of the countries in Europe and many of the countries elsewhere in the world, and how it seems to work pretty well there. I mean, they've got a healthcare system which is for the average person is far superior. People don't have to worry about filling out 600 forms before they get to see their doctor. The doctor doesn't have to have 8 people in their office to fill out forms and
right,
collect information, and doctors can actually spend some time with their patients. And what's wrong with that?
Right. And I think basically people, when you get assigned your doctor, I mean, that's it. You have that doctor for the rest of life. And from what I hear, I think they're actually...
Until they retire, I guess. Yeah, but still...
And they're discouraging people now, now that hospitals are becoming these corporations, taking over, then they're actually discouraging healthcare providers from having relationships with their patients.
Yeah, they put them over the barrel at least as far as paying off their student loans. I mean, that's that's another thing that exactly goes to show that that education, particularly in important fields like medicine, shouldn't be something that people have to go in. Number one, to feel like they need to become wealthy at it in order to prove that the profession's more important, but also they shouldn't be spending their entire life paying off their debt. The education, we have kindergarten in some cases, but in most cases, first grade through 12th grade public education, and why the heck don't we have public education extend through at least the first 4 years of college?
I mean, I guess people will say, there's community colleges, which are more reasonable, but what would that be the equivalent? Our version of free education.
It's a good intermediary point between public schools and 4-year colleges. I mean, a lot of kids, they get to be 18 years old and they graduate high school and they're not quite ready they don't know what they want to do with their lives yet, for gosh sakes. I mean, if people are going to live to be 80 or 90 or 100 years old, give them a little time to figure out what they actually want to do in life.
Yeah, and I think in Europe they encourage that. Some people they can go to school and it's paid, provided, and until you figure out what it is that you want to do, and you shouldn't have to go into debt, in order to figure out what you want, instead of being stuck in a job you hate, be miserable, and then have to stick at it because you're like, I have loans to pay off, so I can't actually be happy, and that's just, then I think you just get off on the wrong foot on life. I don't know, I just think that if you have there are basic inalienable rights that people have, and I think having healthcare and having education, and when you make businesses out of these things, that it becomes all about money and the bottom line. And I don't think you can make healthcare a commodity. I just don't. It's just something that I don't agree with. Or education. And pretty soon people aren't going to be able to afford school anymore. I mean, you've made it a business, and my sister who teaches at Parsons School of Design, she started her own online fashion design course because she says people should be able to study what they want because they're passionate about it and not. Pretty soon I think that's what people are going to do. People today are going to become more entrepreneurial, and they're going to do their own thing, like my nephew who started his own.
And Lorenzo, of course, joined us on the show a couple times, and given us some good insight into the workings of a mind of a young entrepreneur. And gosh, people should do a job in life because they enjoy doing it. Not because they have some ulterior goal or some monetary goal, but they should do something in order to feel fulfilled, so that they're not doing their job with both eyes focused on retirement, whatever the heck that is.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm a real estate professional, and I do it because I enjoy doing it. It's something that gives me a lot of pleasure, and that's what people should use as their guidepost to choosing a profession. You're a licensed massage therapist. You enjoy doing it.
Exactly.
It benefits other people.
Yeah.
And it's that's what life should be about.
I agree, and I think if you're stuck in a job that you're miserable at and you're stressed out, when you're stressed, you get sick, and it's just this vicious cycle, I think. I think if people loved what they did or did something they were passionate about, people would be happier and healthier. And
right.
Life's too short. Why be miserable and
you got
sick
that right.
and I think the stress levels in this country can be way too high.
You got that right, Emily, and shame on the people that think we ought to do differently. Shame on it, because life's too short. Life's meant to be enjoyed.
I think it is. We're only here one time around. And
so this dude Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, okay, and it's funny that you were just saying, like, the thing that you just said, that life can be different, but I think Bernie Sanders is saying, like, there is another way that we can live, and probably the other half of the world lives this way, and we're the only people that don't. I don't know if we're the only people that don't, but
it's a bit of a gun-toting, horn-swaggling, screw the other guy kind of society we have in a lot of respects here in the United States. And people are good here. There's a lot of great people here. But I think we're sold a bill of goods to some degree about consumerism and how we need to buy stuff. And then we have to make our contribution to our economy by buying worthless junk that we don't need.
Exactly.
And why should we?
Exactly. It's all family values, or I don't know. I guess and then it goes from one generation to the next, and then we're just teaching one generation teaches that to the next generation. And maybe, some future generation will decide that's not the way they want to live. Being in debt and starting out life in debt. And the immigrants?
Yeah, what about the immigrants?
Yeah. What about the voice of God?
I hear the voice of God, a.k.a.
Well, this country was built on the blood, sweat, and tears of immigrants. My grandfather and my great-grandparents.
My grandparents came here from, my dad's parents came here from Italy, and, right. Yeah, I look Italian to you. They came here from Ireland. And it was a more reasonable process to become an American citizen back then. Essentially, they got off the boat. They knew a guy. The guy was there waiting at Ellis Island. They were waiting for him. They did the compulsory check of make sure they didn't have lice, and as Rich would say, bada bing, they were here.
Yeah.
They were here. They had jobs waiting for them, and
just with the shirt on their back.
Yeah. And that's the way a lot of people come to America, and that's what makes America the great place that it is people can come here and be part of this great melting pot we call America.
And it's so interesting because I was talking to this woman, and she was saying that what this country was built upon, talking about immigrants, was people leaving their families. Because my grandfather, when he left Italy, he never really saw his immediate family again. Yeah. And then when I went back to meet my family, they're probably wondering, who are you? And they're very suspicious of the long lost generation coming back, wondering what I want.
It's hard to establish a relationship after when there's a whole generation separating you from them.
And so it's people leaving their families and starting new lives here. And I remember I had this experience last year. I went to this exhibit. It was Steve McCurry, who was a National Geographic photographer. He's the one that took that picture of the Afghan girl that's so famous. I don't know if you remember, he's done a lot of these National Geographic covers, and he's an American photographer, and he had this exhibit, and it was called Umbria, and it was the museum in Perugia, and I remember it was all these photos of Umbria.
Is Umbria in northern Italy, or in Sicily?
It's central, really.
Centrally,
yeah, like Tuscany, Umbria, and Marche region.
Rome's kind of central, a little bit of north of central Italy.
Well, Rome's like an hour and a half south of Perugia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So Rome is considered south, but you'd say Umbria is considered central.
Yeah.
It's like the green heart, they call it, because it's the one region in Italy that is not touching water, because Italy is like a peninsula.
Right, yeah.
So it's the one region that it has some lakes, but no like ocean, coastline. Anyway, but there's this picture I remember of this family having lunch in their backyard. And I remember being struck by this photo because it reminded me, I was almost envious in a way of how these people, they come from this culture dating back to the ancient Etruscans. I mean, they really feel they date back to these ancient civilizations, and I thought, I almost in a way envied the fact that to feel part of ancient civilization, and that like being here, I had this whole like philosophical epiphany, thinking like, wow, like what am I a part of? I mean, I'm so detached from any ancient, I mean, I've got relatives in Italy and Ireland and all these people have left their lives to come here, and really I think at least for me, I thought I almost envied in a way, like when you make a part of when you feel that you're part of this ancient civilization, I thought, does that make them feel important just for existing? Because you make part of something. You're part of I don't know.
I think belonging is something that's important to all of us.
Yeah.
Belonging to something, and if as long as you can identify with something that's that you feel comfortable with and positive about, I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, but it just, I just had, it was just seeing this picture was like, wow, like what am I a part of? I'm part Italian, I'm part Irish, I'm part this, I'm part that, and almost in a way, like what roots do I have? And really, I mean, my roots come from all these different places, and some people say that's why we don't really respect the earth or the land as much, because if we were part of the land that we came from, we would respect it so much more. But the fact that we don't really have roots here, maybe that's why we don't take care of the land.
Human race.
Yes, I'm part of the human race. So again, the voice of God.
Thank you for reminding us the voice of God.
But like here in America, we're all really come from, and on a positive note, the fact I think that we do come from people who've come from other lands. They had the courage to leave their country and start a new life. So really, we're all these, it's not running, but the pioneers. We're all pioneer spirit. I mean, unless people that were brought here against their free will, but I mean,
that's very true, and
we're the pioneering ones.
And at the same time, I think people hopefully will maintain ties with the old country, if you will,
right?
And make sure that the kids. Again, I have many clients that. The mother and the father are immigrants, and
right.
the kids in some cases were born here. In some cases, they were born and came along from the country that the family came from.
Right.
But I always encourage them to make sure that their kids learn the language of the country that they came from, because it's a couple of reasons. It makes you smarter to be able to speak more than one language and think in more than one culture.
I agree.
But you have to know where you came from. In order to know where you're going.
It's true.
You have to know where your roots are, where you came from.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing. And of course, grandparents when they bring along mom and dad, when the adults bring along mom and dad, or mom and dad come along later on, they're not as able, not as adept at learning English, but so within the family unit, they'll speak the language of the country that they came from.
Right.
But they do learn to speak English, and in some cases, not to disparage some of my more country bumpkinish conservative brethren, they speak the language better than a lot of folks that have been here their entire lives and only speak English. I think in learning to speak two languages, you understand both languages better.
Right.
At least that's what I found to be the case when I studied Spanish and French in high school and college.
Right.
All of a sudden, I realized that, verb tenses. I had never thought about really the structure, the construct of the English language until I had another language to compare it to. Did you ever study language? Obviously, you're bilingual.
Right, with Italian,
you speak Italian and English.
Right.
But
like the conjugation and the different tenses. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But it's definitely interesting, what you had said, working with your clients as a real estate person.
Yeah.
And so that was, I think it's definitely important to know where you come from. But we got off the topic of politics.
Okay, back to Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
It seemed I guess we've come to the conclusion that we like the fact that he's number one. That he's been saying, he's been making the same points for 40 years plus. He's 74 years old,
right?
And he's got the background that a lot of Republicans tried to throw on President Obama. About being, a radical and a Marxist and all this other stuff, and being, a community organizer, for gosh sakes. When in fact, there's so many great people from all stripes of politics that get involved in community organizing. They gather people around,
right.
And so what the heck's wrong with the term? When did that become a bad term, community organizer?
Yeah, because they liken it to a union organizer.
That's a good point.
Jimmy Hoffa.
That's a good point.
Anytime you organize anyone, people get nervous. As a massage therapist, a lot of massage therapists, I work, they're like, we should organize and get better pay, we should get benefits, we should get paid better, we should get more representation, people get nervous with power and numbers. People should. Yeah, no. See, so it's funny. Community organizer. I think there's power in numbers. People should organize grassroots.
Yeah.
Well, because look, wasn't that Bernie saying? He's like, his whole election, he doesn't want to get funding from the big corporations. He wants to be funded by people.
And he's gathered a fair amount of money together in funding, and I think something that strikes a very negative chord with the media, the mainstream media, and I'll include Fox in there because they're pretty well watched. So they're fairly mainstream in the sense that they're corporate like the rest of them, and Bernie Sanders is taking the approach of doing low cost reaching out to people, advertising, if you will, low cost, low budget through the internet, and not spending a lot of money, and I think that rubs Fox and CNN and CBS, NBC, ABC, everybody else, and it rubs them a little bit the wrong way because they seem to have enjoyed this notion of unlimited campaign financing to be spent on advertising because they can see that's a lot of cashola in their coffers. There's a lot of moolah in their coffers, and
and he's getting a good response. He's attracting large crowds. And I think people want to change. I mean, like with the middle class disappearing, and it's just sad. Like Bethel's getting too expensive to live, and I just think it's sad that communities. You can't afford to live in the town that you grew up in, and I just don't think that's right. Maybe with this new election in Bethel, we were just talking about with first selectmen, maybe it can change. I don't know. What changes in Bethel, for example, local politics? Do you think things will ever change?
I think, well...
Is it inevitable that progression comes and people...
Well, Matt and
Will Duff.
Will Duff, Matt Knickerbocker and Will Duff pretty much know that my heart's in Matt's corner, so I really shouldn't maybe go there too much.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure that local politicians have as much sway over what happens in our towns as maybe they used to, which can be a bad thing and it can be a good thing. It depends on how you look at it. But Bethel's a great little town. It's got a nice downtown. It's got a lot of very wonderful people, and I'm not so sure that we really need to change that much.
Oh, okay. So do you think if Bernie Sanders wins the presidential election, I mean, do you think things will change in this country?
No.
There will be?
No, only in very small shades. We'll be back to where we were perhaps back in times gone by where people didn't have to worry so much about being engulfed by poverty.
Yeah.
A lot of people are worried about that now. You'll find that there'll be a greater sense of shared cooperation. Yeah. Where folks will be wanting to help out somebody else during their time of need because let's face it, one day we all see times in our life where we have financial difficulties, every one of us.
Where are the refugees?
Where are the refugees? Well, don't you think these are values taught at home, though? I mean, don't you think these things should be taught at home? They are taught
at home, and presumably kids have more exposure at home,
right?
As well they should, and schools and their time in school reinforces those values.
Yeah.
And it's family values. Family values is a kind of an overworked term, but family values are certainly important. And I don't know. What do you think, Roberto?
Where's Moses when you need him?
No, Moses.
He just died. No, that was Moses Malone.
No, I mean maybe
Carl Malone, Moses Malone. Which one of them?
Maybe life's just a big pendulum that goes from one extreme to the next. You know, maybe it'll go from one extreme and then things will be a big backlash.
And yet in America, there really doesn't seem to be. We haven't had in the course of our history much in the way of extremes.
Like a depression.
We have elections fairly frequently, so that people recognize that their time in office is short and fleeting.
Right.
And
I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting. Who was talking to someone that was saying there's some office, like senators, that you could just be a senator forever and ever and ever until you die. And
we could be reelected every 6 years in the Senate. Sure.
Oh, okay. There's no term limit like with
No. And are term limits good or bad? I don't know. I'm very. To me, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, because you never know who you're pushing out, and the job. You know the job that they've done, but you never know what you're going to get in place of them. So automatically casting out somebody based on some abstract number of years in office, it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I'm willing to go either way on it. It doesn't make much difference to me.
Really?
Because it gives people because new blood an opportunity, which is a good thing. But there's always a risk in that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Lots of change. I sense a lot of it's a whole new. It's going to be interesting to see who wins. So, do we know who's going to be the candidate yet? Then for the Democratic, do we know?
No.
Oh,
for presidency or for
well, for the presidency.
No, we've got Hillary Clinton. We've got Bernie Sanders. The two main candidates at this point. Joe Biden, Vice President Joe Biden, might step in, and he's very very popular in the party. So there's a possibility that he may step in and he may become the candidate.
How about the Republican Party?
There's, I think, about 25,000 candidates on the Republican side.
Really?
They're letting 11 of them into the.
That's crazy.
But I think at this point the three principal candidates are Donald Trump, believe it or not, Ben Carson, and Carly Fiorina.
Okay.
And the folks that are the more mainstream Republican candidates are having trouble getting any traction, especially with
Jeb Bush.
With Jeb Bush and the other folks that are more mainstream. I like John Kasich from Ohio because he's dare I say a moderate, and moderates don't seem to have much of a standing in the Republican Party at this point. If you're not. It's a very schizoid party, and in the sense that it's being pushed by some extreme elements, and I don't think extreme is is an improper term to use. They're just lunatics, in my opinion. And
the
that
Republicans or the moderates?
The Republican, the folks that are making all the waves at this point. But again, this comes back to the media. The media always likes a good cat fight, and no disrespect toward my two cats at home, Walter and
Basil Budicat.
To Basil or any of the cats in my life, including Kristen. But it's just. It's just flustering to see the word moderate being treated as such. But again, the media they like to stir up a fight because they used to say it sells newspapers. Well, it sells advertising, whether it's newspaper or internet advertising or
it's all about advertising.
Or advertising, and it's just unfortunate to see people trying to push candidates' buttons in order to get a row out of them.
Yeah, well, that's what, like you said, if you get a reaction from a politician, then it causes, more attention, more publicity, more viewers. Oh, it's funny talking about advertising, because I've been studying a lot about brainwaves states, and they say when people watch TV, they're put in this alpha brainwave, and they say people feel peaceful and more relaxed, and that's why advertising is so powerful, because TV puts people in this meditative, more relaxed state.
I talk back to the TV when it advertises. I say,
no,
I'm less inclined to buy a product because I see it advertised.
More people now probably
and I've always been that way, and I think that advertising is inherently a bad thing.
Yeah, and the amount of money people pay on advertising, it's crazy. Anyway,
and that's it.
That's it. All right.
Oh, all right.
Yes. Thank you.